Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm usually a loud mouth. Welcome to the United Parish of Upton. I'm Jeff Curl. I will be moderating today. Bear with me, this is my first time, so I'll do my best. Whether this is your faith home or your first time visiting us, we are all equals here, looking up to Christ, our head. Anyone who shares in this confession is like a child of the same parent with us. I hope you won't hesitate to add your prayers to the prayers of the people this morning. You can use your phone and scan on your flyer here the barcode. If you need any help, just raise your hand. One of us can help you. Just a couple of reminders to keep safe. We're asking everybody to keep their masks on during the service and during the singing. The singing will be provided by our cantor, Amin, which she's lovely. It's very nice to have you, and thank you, Jackie, also for providing the music. Our goal is to provide a safe place to worship together. If you have any feedback, please speak to myself or one of the safety volunteers or Brian after the church if you have any concerns or questions or feedback. There are seasons to be separate and seasons to gather. Those seasons are changing for many of us this summer. And so we're here to bear witness to one another's lives and to God's movement in our midst. Some of us are givers and some of us are receivers today. Next week, that might be different. Some of us are online today and some of us are in this room. But that might be different next week. Now let us pray. Come, Creator, into our lives. In you we live and move and have our very being. Open now the windows of our soul.
Everything, and a time for every matter under the heavens, a time for giving birth and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting what was planted, a time for killing and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for crying and a time for laughing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for avoiding embraces, a time for searching and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for throwing away, a time for tearing and a time for repairing, a time for keeping silent and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace.
The body prayer we have learned has seen us through a season when we were afraid of the ways our bodies could break or fail. It served us to give a positive way to think of our bodies, which is important when we remember that God moved into the neighborhood of the body like ours. Yes, our bodies have germs and pain and other difficult things, but they are also works of art made by God. So as we turn from seasons of crying towards seasons of laughter, let's join together in praying with our whole bodies. If you all feel comfortable standing, please do so as we do our body prayer. As we get loose and relax and move it. So find your balance, seated or standing. God is our rock, our foundation. Focus on your breath. Breathe 3 times deeply. God's breath of life. In God we live, move, and have our being. Hands up, palms out. Become a bridge for energy on earth as it is in heaven. Hands on head. Christ is my head. Hands on heart. Christ is my heart. Hands on belly. Christ is my nourishment. Stretch your arms wide as a gesture of blessing for the whole world. We will bow 3 times. The first one is for wow. Our second time is for thanks. The third one is for help. We're passing the peace now. Please offer a nod or bow toward each other in this room and online so we can share Christ's peace with one another.
Today's reading is from Deuteronomy 6, verses 1 through 19, taken from the Common English Bible. Now these are the commandments, the regulations and the case laws that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you to follow in the land you are entering to possess, so that you will fear the Lord your God by keeping all his regulations and his commandments that I am commanding you, both you and your sons and daughters, all the days of your life, so that you will lengthen your life. Listen to them, Israel. Follow them carefully so that things will go well for you and so that you will continue to multiply exactly as the Lord your ancestors' God promised you in a land full of milk and honey. Israel, listen. Our God is the Lord, only the Lord. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your being, and all your strength. These words that I am commanding you today must always be on your minds. Recite them to your children. Talk about them when you are sitting around your house, and when you are out and about, and when you are lying down, and when you are getting up. Tie them on your hand as a sign. They should be on your forehead as a symbol. Write them on your house's door frames and on your city's gates. Now, once the Lord your God has brought you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to you, a land that will be full of large and wonderful towns that you didn't build, houses stocked with all kinds of goods that you didn't stock, cisterns that you didn't make, vineyards and olive trees that you didn't plant, and you eat and get stuffed. Watch yourself. Don't forget the Lord, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Revere the Lord your God, serve him, and take your solemn pledges in his name. Don't follow other gods, those gods of the people around you, because the Lord your God, who is with you and among you, is a passionate God. The Lord of your God's anger will burn against you, and he will wipe you off the fertile land. Don't test the Lord your God the way you frustrated him at Massah. You must carefully follow the Lord your God's commands, along with the laws and regulations he has given you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that things will go well for you, and so you will enter and take possession of the wonderful land that the Lord swore to your ancestors. And so the Lord will drive out all your enemies from before you, just as he promised. Our second reading is from Mark 12, verses 28 through 30. One of the legal experts heard their dispute and saw how well Jesus answered them. He came over and asked him, which commandments is the most important of all? Jesus replied, the most important one is, Israel, listen. Our God is the one Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This ends our readings for today.
Hi, United Parish. So good to be with you during this new adventure that we're going on this summer. I hope that you are where you want to be right now, enjoying the service. I started something new this summer also. I started a new diet program called Noom. It's an app on my phone, just like everything else in the world today. It walks me through a daily regimen of weighing myself, tracking my food, exercise goals, and some quick little educational and motivational comments that make me motivated throughout the day. And I love it. I love step by step. Sometimes you just need someone to just tell you how to make it happen. But when I'm honest, even though I love going step by step on things, I know that I can't just bury my head into an app and meet my health goals. I'm going to need the support of people around me, and I'm going to have to live in the real world. So that's when it gets complicated. That's when it gets messy. And that's when it gets real. Our reading today is sometimes called the greatest commandment story.
It's in 3 of the Gospels. We read the version in Mark this morning, and it's often taken as a personal instruction, a step-by-step, how to be a good Christian. Love God with all of your heart, your soul, your strength, and love your neighbor. And yet, Jesus is in a crowd when he has this conversation with the scribe, a crowd that includes his disciples. And it's included in a group of stories where Jesus seems to be talking to the overall Roman society and to his small group of followers, that small community that is soon going to need to go on without him. And for this lesson, Jesus chooses to go back to a fundamental Jewish text in Deuteronomy. So let's look at Deuteronomy. It has a history of being a support for communities that are going through a stressful time. The traditional story has Moses saying, "Love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your strength," to the Israelites as they left the desert and went into the promised land. Ironically, the end of Moses' time with them. It's instructions for a community coming out of a time of turmoil and into an uncertain future, one with a lot of hope and a lot of possibilities. But there's another layer to this story, which is why I love the Bible. Biblical scholars actually believe that Deuteronomy was written 400 years after the time we consider the traditional story of Moses. Written during King Josiah, who was doing a reform of Jewish rituals because they were being invaded from the north and many of the rituals were being lost. The culture was being lost. So he centralized the rituals in the south, in Jerusalem, at the temple there. And he called all to come to the temple to refresh their faith and to be together as a community for survival. You can hear the fear in the text. I know some of the words are harsh, but when we're in that type of a situation, sometimes we fear the other, and we use such language. But Josiah was trying to bring his community together and get them through a turbulent time with those words. And 700 years later, Jesus spoke the same words to a community under siege by the Romans and to his disciples who were about to lead their community through even more terror, war, and destruction. We don't know the exact years, but it's possible that by the time the Gospel of Mark was written, the temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed. Or they were in the middle of the war that ended up destroying it. And Jews had been completely kicked out of Rome legally. And other Jews were running from Jerusalem to save their lives from the violence and the war. Finally, this group of Jesus followers had been existing for 30 years without their leader. It was certainly a time of turbulence. And the gospel chose to include, again, these critical words. Also during this chaotic time, Judaism was adjusting to their new times, this horrible time of losing the temple. The exact opposite of Josiah's time, but still a transition. The rabbinic tradition was being built and created by the rabbis who had escaped Jerusalem. And they, again, turn to these fundamental words in Deuteronomy. They established a daily prayer that happens every morning and every night to this day as part of their rabbinic tradition that includes the words, love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your strength. Do you see a pattern? All of these communities turn to the same guidance to live in love and purpose together. That was a long history. What do we take from it all? Well, that's all you got to take, is that this text has a rich history of comforting and guiding communities, of reminding them that they are in a relationship with God. The relationship includes both comfort and accountability. Not because God needs us, but because God guides us to a life that is fulfilling and to a community that is giving and abundant and strong in purpose. When we consider these words from the perspective of a community, what do they call us to do? Love God with all of your heart. This reminds us to open our hearts, to listen with an openness as we work with our neighbors and as we consider all of our lives together in community. Are we filling this world with an open, unconditional love? Love God with all of your soul. Loving with all of your soul is a commitment beyond your knowing, beyond our own self-interests. It's a true commitment to God's will. Are we listening to our community for God's will? And love God with all of our strength. Strength, it's such a strange word. The other two gospels actually don't even use it because it's a tough one. There are so many times when we turn to God when we feel our weakest as individuals. Sometimes it takes all of our strength simply to reach out and ask for help during those times. We're reminded that God hears the weakest voice. And God calls us all to use our strength as a community to turn to those who need to be lifted. Who can we lift this week? When I hear these words, I hear both a call to action and a promise from God. A call to give my heart and a promise that in community, my love is multiplied and returned. A call to surrender my will. And a promise that God's will mean abundance and opportunity for all. A call to join the strength of others when they need a hand and when I can offer a hand. And a promise that God's strength supports me. God's strength, love, justice is seen through us and is holding us, strengthening us, and calling us. Loving God and loving neighbor are one and the same. The whole world is going through a transition right now. There is still apprehension and confusion. There are still so many things to process about last year. Loss and fear and disappointments and new learnings. And there is so much potential on the horizon. Newfound freedom to explore, joy in the things that we have not experienced for a year. So, this morning, I propose that we consider the words of the greatest commandment, the words that have provided strength to so many communities in turbulent times. And as these next days progress through the end of this pandemic, let us walk forward as a community, as a society, holding God's love in our hearts, committed to God's will in our souls, and sharing the strength of our community with all those who need a lift in this time of transition. Times like these are the opportunity to bring our faith into the world and to worship God with love and action. Let it be so. A wonderful day, everyone.
Prayers of the people. The slide display will show all prayers submitted today or during the service. I'll read it here, since some of you might not be able to read it. Prayers for the Ballard family as they deal with the death of Kathleen's husband and Nolan, Kira, and Emma's father, Jeff, this week. Now, if we could pray the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thank you, Aline. It's so nice to hear a human voice in person. United Parish is a congregational church. Today we are celebrating the offerings made by some of our speakers and preachers, hosts and helpers, singers and players. But each week, these roles turn. In each season, our needs and ways of ministry turn in new directions. There is a place for you and your gifts here. Our ministry is fully supported by the time, energy, money, and creativity of you all of us, whether you're sitting in this room or online. And it doesn't help only us. Through our community connections and our giving to the denominations we're part of, our ministry is turning the seasons all over the world. You can support our ministry financially online with the link on our website or in our weekly emails. If you want to learn more or would like to get involved in more ways to help, email us at the address printed in your bulletin, comment on our website, or send a personal message to one of our ministers whom you have come to know. As a part of our safety protocol, we will not be taking an offering during the service. There is a plate at the back of each aisle if you would like to leave your offering. Please pray with me. God of the heavens, the land and the water that covers it, We know what it is like to be tossed about in a storm. We know that the faith we profess when days are calm and sunny is challenged and shaky when the storm is furious and the water is swamping our boat. As we offer our gifts to you this day, they are given with a hope that we will be better able to let go of what the world tells us will guarantee our security and find our hope and assurance in your redeeming love. Dedicate these gifts in the knowledge that there are other boats besides ours in the same storm. We pray this prayer in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you for coming, everybody. It's great to see faces and eyeballs, and hopefully smiles soon. May you all feel the blessing of God this week, and also share your blessings as we realize that we are the hands of God here on earth. Now, go in peace to love and serve both God and neighbor. Amen. I didn't have this for
I'm keeping this in my bag now,
Yeah.
just in case.
That voice is so lovely.
Yeah, she did a beautiful job. Yeah, feel the steam.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be
It's gonna be hot.
steamy.
You got a pool?